The process actually begins with budget proposals submitted by the executive branch. In other words, that would be the governor's proposed budget for the executive branch, which of course is the biggest budget and gets the most attention. In fact, when I use the term state budget, that's primarily what people think about. But there's also a much smaller but equally important budget, which is of the judicial branch, which is a budget that covers the running of our court system from the Supreme Court all the way down to county circuit court. So the hiring of judges, assistants, court reporters, clerks for each of those courts, and all of the management of the papers and documents and of the different courts. So it covers a lot of ground, and it's a very important part of our Constitution that we have access to justice, but that is all funded through the judicial branch budget. Then the legislative branch also has a budget which has to do with paying the legislators their pay for being a part of the legislature and their expenses, per diem expenses that they have in attending sessions or even interim meetings. Also the cost of our legislative service office, which is the office that supports us. So it has a section on the finances that we lean heavily into during the budget session. There are other members of our what's called Legislative Service Office, we call it the LSO, that do have expertise in other areas, taxation, minerals, and they help us develop our legislation, help us write bills and things. So that is what would be included in the legislative branch budget. Well, each branch's budget is sent to and reviewed by the Joint Appropriations Committee. This is a committee made up of senators representing the Senate side and House of Representative members representing the House side, working together. And so they review in detail, along with the support system from LSO, to review those budgets. They begin to hold hearings to gather more information and ask questions about the proposals and why they're the amount they are, what exactly are they going to. And then they will, we call them the JAC for short, for Joint Appropriation Committee. And the JAC will then begin a process of doing markups on the budgets. And so that's simply striking things out, putting new things in, that we call that process markup. And it has specific dates of those markups to be done by, so we can keep on a schedule. So again, all these are happening before the session. So the Joint Appropriations Committee has already begun some preliminary work, but in the beginning of December, they will begin work in earnest and spend weeks on doing this work on behalf of both chambers. So a lot of the analysis of the budget will come from that. And then eventually the Joint Appropriations Committee will end up with a recommendation that includes all their markups on each branch's budget. That's what we will receive and the place we will start as we come for the budget session in February. During the budget session, we begin working most earnestly on the executive branch budget proposal. And so we begin with what are called mirror bills, House Bill 1 and Senate File 1, and they are the proposed budget by the Joint Appropriations Committee based on changes and adjustments they made from the budget that was proposed by the governor. And then each chamber begins to separately work those bills. And then ultimately, those have to be compared and we have to work out differences because we must send from the legislature an agreed upon budget that both houses can agree to. And we send that to the governor. The governor reviews the budget and the changes made by the legislature, and he has authority to do what is called line item veto, which means he can just go into certain sections that he might not agree with and change them. Sometimes he changes them back to what he had before, or he puts in a compromise number or proposal, and he goes through that process, and he typically releases those line item vetoes early. Like he doesn't wait till he's done with all of them, but they come out because they have to be voted on separately. And so once those, or a line item veto is published, then the legislature has the right to override those vetoes. It takes a 2/3 vote of each chamber to override the veto of the governor. And so that process goes on, and until either line item vetoes by the governor are overridden or not overridden. And then in the end, the governor will sign the final budget for the executive branch, and the similar process for the other branches as well. And the final result of this process will be a 2027-2028 biennium budget for the state of Wyoming, which will be and always has been a balanced budget.